All right, guys, just want to welcome back to your Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick are doing our preview and prediction for a big contest going down Friday night in Vegas. Syracuse traveling to UNLV, a team that's been getting a lot of hype the last couple of weeks, been really in the headlines, and for good reasons. They're now ranked 25th nationally, the favorite to be the G5 representative in the CFP. They're 5.5-point favorites. 59.5 is the total. 9 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. You start with the Syracuse offense. Coming into the year, we knew this would be a pretty exciting unit, at least on paper. And so far, they've lived up to the expectations. 34 points per game. They're getting a little bit of everything from everybody. And it starts with Kyle McCord. Guys completing 65%, 360-plus yards per game, 14 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. This is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the nation in the first month of the season, Nick. Maybe even higher than that, you could argue. Biggest problem for McCord, he's gotten a little carried away the last couple weeks. 4 interceptions, had some pretty bad ones against Stanford, just throws that were not good enough. They weren't, they were underthrown balls, quite frankly. He had 2 more against Holy Cross. His first pick was on the final play of the half. It was a bad ball. He just blatantly forced it, pretty much on purpose. Final seconds, just trying to make something happen. So, give that one, I guess, a bit of a pass. He threw another one right out of the gates, though, on a 3rd and long. It was like a 12-play drive or something like that. Just airmailed it completely over the wide receiver's head into traffic, and it was intercepted. So that's the thing here with McCord, Nick, because he's been great, but the last 2 games, it's been a little bit iffy because of the turnovers. Those negatives are certainly, shying away from the positives he's been able to bring to the table, though. 339 and 385 passing with 6 touchdowns in those respective contests. He's the heart and soul of this offense, Nick. What do you make of his September that, again, was a little bit, more of a negative the past couple of weeks, but this is still a very hot quarterback and a guy that can certainly come in here as an NFL talent and light up the Rebels?
I had a very strong feeling when they plugged Kyle McCord in this offense that he hit the ground running. I felt that he was, the unfair scapegoat out there in Columbus last year following the season for the Buckeyes. I figured he hit the ground running and be comfortable, and he looked really good the first 2 weeks. And even though the turnovers were bad the past couple of games, 2 against Holy Cross and 2 against Stanford, he still is really having a strong season so far. He's looked dialed in outside of those a couple sloppy mistakes. Particularly in the Stanford game, one of those interceptions was a very bad thrown ball by him. It was very clear that the defensive player was able to read it almost easily and almost immediately and pick the ball off. But I've been very impressed with his performance. 64.5% comp rate, 1,400 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, all really solid numbers. He also has a rushing touchdown so far this season where he laid out his lines, laid out his body on the line, scrambled a little bit when the play broke down and made something happen for his team. I've been really happy with what McCord's been able to do. You plugged him in, and he's found success early on. One of the better passers in the nation so far. Really happy with his performance. Just got to cut down on the turnovers. I think some of it might be overlooking the opponents and overlooking the defense and thinking like, oh, we're just playing, an FCS team. We're just playing Stanford, who aren't very good. I think he's going to be focused for this game. He's going to be locked in, and hopefully he'll be able to cut down on turnovers and avoid any silly mistakes in this one.
The Qs do a good job with a quick passing game, curls, routes to the sticks. McCord does a good job with his ball placement versus contested coverage. Wide receivers, they've been forced to make tough catches, and they've shown very good concentration. They're hoping to have Zeed Haynes back for this one. If not, they're still incredibly deep at receiver. Trevor Pena's having a breakout season. Jackson Meeks has been very good. Umari Hatcher. And then tight end Aronde Gadsden. All 4 of these guys have 200-plus yards and at least 2 touchdowns each. They're spreading the wealth exponentially, Nick. Gadsden, of course, one of the better tight ends in the country at 6'5", 236. Last 2 games for him has also been very quiet. Only 3 receptions for 16 yards. And that's sometimes what happens when you play the tight end position. He needs to be more of a focal point, though, for Syracuse. And coming into a game like this, you can imagine he's going to be back to his typical self. 6-7 receptions, should get double-figure targets. At least that should be the game plan. If you want to win a game like this on the road where you're an underdog against a red-hot UNLV team, Gadsden's going to have to get a lot more looks, but the diversity here in the receiving corps is very impressive.
Gadsden has been receiving a little more attention on the defensive side of the ball, getting double-teamed a little bit more often. You saw Stanford run some double teams against him in that matchup a couple weeks ago, as they're trying to focus on shutting down the big tight end who's been really solid at 217 yards receiving, 13.6 yards per grab, and 3 scores. Pena's been a really solid breakout guy. Did not expect him to be the top receiver on this team. 316 yards receiving, 12.2 yards to grab, and 5 scores. Jackson Meeks, 276, 14.5, and 2 scores. While Hatcher also has 218, 18.2, and 2 scores. They've been able to spread the ball out. LaQuinn Allen also has 20 receptions out of the backfield. They've been targeting him, so there's some solid variety across the board. 5 receivers here with at least 12 receptions. So really good balance on this offense. I really like what they've been able to do so far. McCord's spreading the wealth. He hasn't been focusing on one guy in particular, and it's really really helped out when you have a situation if Gadsden gets double teamed. You could throw to Pena, you could throw to Allen, you could throw to somebody else, spread the wealth a little bit, and not really get caught into those big problems. I like what I've seen out of the balance of this offense passing the ball so far.
Quint Allen, a very good running back. He's not just a check down option. Those 20 receptions are second on the team. He's a guy you can really, have your run out into the pattern and make plays. 287 rushing and a score for him. The run game's been complimentary, running for about less than 30 attempts per game. Did nothing against the Qs, and they haven't had a game of over 140 yards rushing this year. 3.5 yards per carry. Certainly need to be to a bit of a higher tune, but this is going to be a complimentary part of their offense. Biggest thing with that loss against Stanford was this offensive line was pretty abysmal. Going into the matchup, we praised Demetrius Witherspoon at left tackle, and then the guy on the right side in Savion Washington for how good they've been. And those guys have tremendous size, really good upside in terms of potential. They were awful against Syracuse or against Stanford, and that's why they struggled in that game. McCord can't do it all by himself. He's got to take extra risks. And that's going to lead to those mistakes that we allude to when you're not having as much confidence in your O-line. Jacob Bradford at left guard's having a solid year. Jay Orney-Reed, usually an all-right player for them at center, and then Mark Petrie has been a little shaky as well at right guard. They started off good, Nick, this offensive line did, but as of late, they've not been as great in the D-line. It's, a good one for UNLV. They probably don't have the same heat off the edge that maybe a Georgia Tech or a Stanford do, but it doesn't matter. They're still going to be going up against a good football team, a good defense, and when you're playing poor, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. If you continue to make those mistakes in protection, they're going to get to you, and they're probably going to cause more mistakes.
This offensive line certainly has to play better here. Washington and Witherspoon have to be better on their respective tackle positions. You cannot let this UNLV pass rush get behind you and make McCord uncomfortable. When he rushes his throws, when he gets a little bouncy in the pocket, he ends up throwing a pick, making a mistake. We've seen that at Ohio State. We've seen that at Syracuse at times as well. He's got to stay focused. Got to give him a clean pocket here. This offensive line has to play a really strong game against a really strong defensive line from UNLV.
Yeah, McCord, that is, he's shown some mobility, a little bit more than we probably expected. He can make plays on the run, but that's not his game. He wants to be a traditional pocket passer. Moving to the UNLV offense, obviously the biggest headline in CFB this past week was Matt Sluka pretty much quitting on his football team in the middle of the season. They don't need him, no problem, right? Malik Williams, another transfer they picked up from Campbell. He was very excited for this opportunity. He delivered 301 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had a great, stellar, debut against Fresno State in a major win. And this was a quarterback battle that was quite close for most of the offseason. So it's not like this was just a blown away starter. This guy, Williams, was in the battle the entire time. And he did a very good job of running this option offense. They're facing a run defense that's been underperforming. They also are missing their top linebacker still. So this seems like an ideal opportunity for UNLV to run it up. Kylan James, Greg Burrell, 2 running backs that are going to split touches. Michael Allen, of course, transferred out. Jane Thomas, another guy who's going to get a lot of looks. He, gets about, 7-8 touches per game. I mean, this is a pretty diverse backfield, Nick. They're probably not the most talented, but these guys have fresh legs. And Williams, of course, he was very impressive as a runner in his debut, 119 yards. And then in the second game of the season, he got involved. That's the only other time he had carries. He had 88 yards, almost 9 yards per touch. So this is a guy that's also a very good runner. And the run game may have even gotten better with him at the helm.
This is an incredibly balanced quarterback option now, considering everything that happened. Soka left, that was a very disappointing move when it happened. But now you plug in Malik Williams, who I think is a really solid dual threat option that they could run the option type attack with. He had a really solid game. You read off some of the stats there. I was very impressed. 13 to 16 passing for 182, I think is really impressive. He was really smart with the ball, didn't put the ball in harm's way. 81% comp rate in that game against Fresno State, where they really beat the brakes off the Bulldogs when some people thought Fresno State might be able to contend, given all the turmoil going around. The head coach of UNLV said, business as usual. They plug in a new quarterback. A lot of the players in the locker room were excited to play with him. He threw to Ricky White a lot, who had 2 receiving touchdowns in this game. That looks to be a great partnership between those two. He's really solid on the ground as well, which I think is something that could be a huge asset. 12 carries for nearly 120 yards is a really strong number, and it's very impressive. So I think you have Malik Williams. This team is still going to be just fine. They have a nice dual threat balance. They're really solid in the passing game potentially, and really strong in the running game. I like what this offense is going to be able to do on the ground going forward.
209 yards per game rushing against the 3 FBS opponents they have faced. Like you alluded to, the receiving group. And everyone knows if they watch college football that UNLV has a great 1-2 punch in Ricky White and Jacob DeJesus. I mean, this is a guy in White who was standout at Michigan State, had 1,400 yards last year. I mean, this is a guy that finally was able to get back involved. He had a big game against Utah Tech, a very easy opponent. But other than that, Nick, he was not a part of this offense one bit. Like you said, they plug in a new quarterback. He's instantly a game changer. 10 grabs, 127, and 2 scores. Seems like this offense has gotten significantly better with this change. And De Jesus, he was their second leading receiver last year. And, he's able to probably get more touches after only having, he had 0 against Fresno, but he also wasn't doing much in terms of yards. I'm sorry, he had 2 grabs from 50 yards, that's a season high for him. Disregard those other numbers. And he had 2 touchdowns in the opener against Houston. So, this is a great 1-2 punch they have here. And I think the biggest thing for UNLV is this offensive line. A lot of people consider this to be the best in program history, and I'd probably agree with that. This was a good offense last year with Maeva under center. Jalen St. John at left tackle is a really good run blocker. Over on the right side, they have Tiger Shanks, who is one of the game's best right tackles. For a couple of years now, he's been an outstanding player for them. And they're pretty sound on the interior as well. They have a center in Jake Hazen, who's having a phenomenal year as a pass blocker. It'll be interesting to see how UNLV does, Nick, because they've not really had to operate, with losing in many of these games. Syracuse, this is an attack that if they come out guns a-blazing, you're going to have to keep up with them. I expect them to be in their normal offense for most of the game, but I think the O-line could maybe be tested a bit if it's late in the contest and they got to drop back passing a little bit more. You think they'll be phased, or you think they'll be stout in a game like this?
I think this is a very interesting matchup for this offensive line. This has been a really strong unit, one of the best in program history for the Rebels so far. I really like what they have on this offensive line. It's a very strong physical unit. You have a new quarterback here. Obviously, the film on him is a little less for Syracuse. I like the 1-2 punch they have. Ricky White and De Jesus, we talked about them. Both really talented players. White, expect him to have a big game here trying to target some of those secondary pieces for Syracuse that looked a little shaky at time. This offensive line, I think they've been really good, especially in the interior, at guard and center position. I think they've been really strong in that department. Syracuse has had some success against the running in terms of pass rush. Can they make this quarterback a little uncomfortable? If you can make Williams uncomfortable, maybe throw him off his game a little bit, force him into a turnover, which he hasn't done so far this season, could potentially help out the Orange in this game, as they really, need to make this quarterback who's been dialed in and really good in his one start uncomfortable against a solid Fresno State team. I like UNLV's matchup in the trenches here. I think they're going to win that matchup, give their quarterback some running back lanes on the ground, and also give them some opportunity to pass, which could really work out well for this team.
Yeah, UNLV on offense, they only have 2 giveaways this year, so they've been very superb on that side of the ball. Look at the Syracuse defense that's going to try and match up with these guys. Of course, Fadil Diggs, he's likely to eat. He's just a phenomenal pass rusher, levels above anybody else on this field. Great player, right? But the rest of the D-line needs to step up. And they have players capable of that. Dennis Jarquez, Kevin Jabity, 2 veterans there on the D-line. Murad Watson has been playing a good bit. This is a D-line that they're going to have to continue to be better, especially in a game like this, because they've not done great against the run. They didn't have a good game against Holy Cross, whatever. Stanford had their number. Ohio, they ran the ball very well against them. And then they did very good against Georgia Tech, though. So this run defense has shown flashes of being able to be good. A lot of the yards and scores they gave up were to Haynes King really improvising. So, if you can keep the quarterback in the pocket, Nick, and you can contain this run game, the Syracuse defense could be in for a good contest. Of course, Marlo Wax is still out, though, at linebacker. Derek McDonald is really, filled in admirably. The rest of the group, though, is going to have to rally the troops because the run defense, I'm not that confident in being able to play good in this game. But again, against the Yellow Jackets, Nick, they showcased flashes of being able to slow them down. What version are we going to get on Friday night?
This is certainly a toss-up, right? What will this run defense look like? What will this front 7 look like? Derek McDonald has stepped up and been a really solid piece at linebacker, 29 total tackles for him. Fadil Diggs, he's plugged in perfectly as a transfer, 21 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Dennis Jacquez Jr. has 9 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Kevin Jolby, 9 as well, and 2.5 tackles for loss for him. While some other pieces have a couple tackles, Dion Wilson, 8 tackles on our Sparrow as a rotational linebacker, 6 tackles. James Hurt Jr. has 4 tackles and a pick, while Rashad Perry has moved around a little bit. He has 2 total tackles and a tackle for loss in 3 games. So I like some of the depth they have here. Losing Wax has certainly been a bit of a concern for this linebacking core, and the depth is a little thin. Hurd has to step up and be big in the games, as well as Sparrow, who has to really find a way to get a bigger role and hopefully live up to those expectations. This team has to be good against the run because you're going to run the ball a lot here if you're in LV, so you're going to have to be balanced. The run defense has not been ideal so far. Got to get back on track here, and this is a tough opponent to do that against.
Yeah, Sparrow, he got on the field against Stanford a good bit, was awful in that game. He's seen increased reps. So, linebacker in the middle of the defense is a bit of an issue for them. Maybe they'll look to try to maybe crowd the box a little bit more against this run game. You look at the secondary, though, this is a really good unit for Syracuse. I thought coming into the year, this was probably the best positional group on the team. Clarence Lewis, he's having a phenomenal year. He's elite for them at corner. Jaden Bellamy, on the other hand, also having a pretty good season. Devin Grant, this is a guy who's playing more of a versatile role for them, mainly in the slot, also having a phenomenal season for Syracuse. And, of course, Justin Barron, he's starting to play in the box a little bit more due to some of the deficiencies at linebacker. Really good player for them. He's a veteran. Elijah Clark, Deuce Chestnut coming back to town. These two safeties have been pretty admirable. Chestnut needs to get under control. He's got 6 missed tackles this year, and Barron has 8. So some of these guys need to be better improved in tackling, and that's going to be big against a rushing attack that's going to throw out a lot of diversity. They're going to have a lot of different looks. They're going to attack you on the interior, on the edge. They're going to try and wear out this defense, Nick. But if they can slow down the run, and these DBs can, face this passing attack, I think they have a pretty good shot of slowing them down. Lewis on Ricky White will be a hell of a matchup.
This is going to be an interesting matchup to watch. Lewis on Ricky White. That's going against a credible wide receiver, a really solid piece in the secondary. That's a matchup you want to keep your eyes on all night because Lewis has been great. 5 pass breakups, a pick, 12 total tackles, looked really good in coverage. Bellamy as well, 12 total tackles, 1 pick, which he returned for a touchdown. 2 pass breakups. Devin Grant, 3 pass breakups, 13 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss. He's been really solid. They moved him around a little bit. Chestnut's been good as well, 17 total tackles and a pass breakup. Eli Clark, that is, has been really good. 22 total tackles, and Justin Barron, 27 total tackles. They've moved him around a fair bit as well. Getting him in the box, I think it makes a lot of sense because he's a really good, surefire tackler. And when you have deficiencies at linebacker, it's solid to have a guy that will be able to wrap up and make tackles in the middle there. This secondary, I've been happy with them. They're going to have a tough test here, though, when they do throw the ball. When you have a guy like White that could burn, you can make a lot of plays. You got to be able to keep an eye on him and make sure you prevent him getting big play potential.
Moving to the Rebel defense, a unit that was, pretty bad for them last season. It's what held them back from eventually claiming the Mountain West Championship. But so far, they are much better. This is a defensive line that's, got plenty of different guys getting into the lineup. Alex Whitmore, Antonio Doyle, Jaden Dixon have been the real standouts so far. I mean, this defensive line, they all provide, admirable play, and that's why they've been able to sustain success so far this year. Against Kansas, they give about 200 yards rushing. Other than that, they've been very sound. The other teams they've played, though, aren't very good on offense. Fresno State's not that good at running the football. Houston, they've gotten shut out 2 games in a row. So it's not the greatest measuring stick so far, Nick. This is going to be a completely different test for this defense. And, I alluded to earlier, they're going to be able to take advantage of, maybe some poor tackle play for the Orange. And I'm not sure that they will because they don't really seem to have that much heat coming off the edge. They do have 13 sacks this year. And, of course, some of the linebackers are getting involved in that regard. But they really teed off in the season opener. They did have 4 against Fresno State. So I think they can provide some solid pass rushing here and run stopping. But do you think that they'll be a liability by any means?
I don't know if it'll be a liability, but they certainly have to have a strong day, make McCord be uncomfortable, throw him off his game a little bit. Whitmore, 10 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. Antonio Doyle has 7 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. Dixon, 6 total tackles and a sack for him, while Lucas Conte and Cooper Webb each have 5 total tackles and rotational appearances. Webb has a sack as well. They have good balance. It looks like they have a couple of sacks here and there. They need to have solid sacks. They need to get pressure on McCord. They got to find a way to get those number up. They've played bad offenses. They've not played a quarterback of the caliber of Kyle McCord. If you give him time in the pocket, he's going to pick you apart all day with the plethora of weapons he has. They got to put pressure on him immediately. McCord has to feel the heat early on, or he's going to get comfortable in his groove and just pick you apart over the middle.
When you look at the middle of the defense, their linebackers are providing great play for them. Jackson Woodard has been phenomenal. Manai Powell as well. He's been really good against the run. Woodard, he's really stacking up the stat sheet here. He's been the leader for them in every category. 31 tackles, 7.5 TFL, 3 sacks. And he even has 2 pass breakups as well. So this is a very good linebacker. It's rising up draft boards. Also has an interception. The linebacker group's been really good for them, Nick, and I certainly think that they're going to continue to be a standout group in this game.
You know me, I love a guy who loads up the stat sheet, and Woodard's doing that. You listed all his stats, including a pick, which you didn't mention there. So he's got a lot of numbers. That interception is solid to add to his resume. I've been really impressed with him, a really good linebacker in the middle there. Leading this team, really good quarterback of the defense, Powell as well, 21 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and a sack. Like what these linebackers have, this is a really solid 1-2 punch here. Marcel McDuffie as well is another linebacker this team has that we haven't seen a whole lot of production on him, but he has 8 total tackles in 2 games this season. So I like what they have at the linebacking core. This is a really solid unit that is hard-hitting, good leadership in Woodard.
You look at the secondary group that's been outstanding for them so far. They're second nationally of 9 interceptions. They've been very sound against the pass. Gave up 300 plus against Fresno, but they're playing from behind, a very large deficit there. They faced a great trio of weapons already this year against Kansas. The quarterback, not so much, but they did face some good wide receivers, held them in check to only 153 yards, picked them off twice. This is secondary playing very good right now. Cameron Oliver, Tony Grimes, of course, the former 5-stars, finding a nice home here. These two have been pretty admirable so far, especially against the run. I wonder how they're going to do in a matchup like this, though. In the slot, Jonathan Baldwin's a guy who's been playing a lot of reps, also having a phenomenal year, especially when it comes to getting in the box and making plays. Biggest news here for them, though, is Jalen Catalon, another guy also finding his footing with his newfound home under Barry Odom. Remember, he was a standout at Arkansas for a little bit, really battled injuries the past couple of years. This guy's having an elite season. It's going to be a lock, I think, for all conference honors. Nation high 4 interceptions right now. This guy's been tremendous, Nick. What do you make of the secondary so far? Because they've been good, playing weak opponents. Again, they did play talented receivers against the Jayhawks, but this is a completely different animal. The production, the quarterback is NFL caliber here, and it could potentially be an opportunity for them to get exposed a little bit.
Catalon's a really incredible player in the secondary, really great coverage asset, 4 interceptions, including a pick 6, 2 pass breakups, 22 total tackles, and a tackle for loss. Cam Oliver, 10 total tackles, a sack, and a pick for him. Malik Chavez, 8 total tackles for him, plus a forced fumble. Tony Grimes, 2 total tackles, and 2 pass breakups and coverage. A good coverage asset there. This has been a good secondary so far. Yes, they're playing weak teams, and they're going to get tested here. Can they stand up to the test? You do have solid SEC leadership in Catalon. Grimes is a really solid piece as well at right cornerback. I think this team has enough to stand up against this tough offense, but this is going to be a big test for them. They could find themselves in trouble early on, and McCord's in a groove. This is a really tough matchup for this UNLV defense.
Tail the tape, the team comparisons. QB, pretty easy nod there. Running back, I'll give it to the Rebels. I think a wide receiver, they're pretty even though the Qs, they're much deeper. Ricky White might be that great of an equalizer. Could probably go the orange in that direction. On the O-line, UNLV, a clear advantage. The D-line, I think Syracuse, they're more talented there, especially Diggs. He's probably going to be the best player on any defense this weekend. Between these two teams, of course. UNLV, linebacking edge, with them being a little bit wounded for the orange, and then I'll give even secondary so far. What do you think about these, Nick, especially wide receiver in the secondary getting evens?
I think this is interesting when you look at the comparison here. I think the secondary is very close. I would probably give it to UNLV. I'd give the wide receiver to Syracuse, even though Ricky White's incredible. I think the depth just kind of wins that matchup for me. But in general, these are teams that when you look at it, they're pretty balanced across the board. Some nice advantages, certainly some wide advantages at quarterback and on the offensive line. But these are two very similar teams that are matched up pretty evenly here.
Look at the final thoughts in the prediction. Keys to the game, I think, for Q's. McCord needs to protect the ball, but still maintain his aggressiveness. The run defense needs to find more stuffs. For UNLV, keep making big momentum plays across the board. That's something they did against Fresno State. Offense, defense, special teams. I mean, the plays they're making across the board are highly impressive. What's going to happen when those slow down a little bit? They don't come as easy. The run game needs to slow this game down a bit, try to keep McCord and his boys on the sideline. I think they're going to come in and they're going to get the win, Nick. I think everyone here is going to probably pick the Rebels to win this game, including you. Everyone thinks this is a team that's almost a lock if they can beat Boise to be the Group of 5 nominee. But this is a different animal. The defense has played good, but let's not get out of shape here with who they've played. You still got to go out there and play good against the opponents you have played, though. But McCord, NFL caliber quarterback, going up against the defense that might not have that much of a pass rush. The secondary does have ball hawks, but I mean, this guy's gonna be fitting in the tight windows, Nick. You're not gonna be able to be jumping routes like you've been against Houston and Kansas and whatnot. McCord's gonna come into Vegas. He's gonna put on a clinic. I think they're gonna get the job done in what I would consider a bit of an upset because this line's shifted a good bit.
I agree with you on a lot of your points there. I think McCord's going to have a solid day, and I think this is going to be a close game. I am going to take UNLV. I think Syracuse will cover the spread just barely. I have a really close game. A high-scoring game. I think both these offenses will put a lot of points on the board, especially early. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring in this game early on. I want to pick Syracuse. I want to pick the upset here, but I think UNLV has enough juice and momentum, given all the stuff that's going around with them and how they played against Fresno State, really dismantling that team this past weekend. The pathway for them is absolutely there for the playoff right now. The pathway is there for Boise State as well, so that matchup's kind of going to be the Group of 5 do or die game when it all comes down to it, which is certainly going to be fun to watch. This would be a huge win. This would probably be one of the better wins that any Group of 5 team has in terms of the contenders right now. This would be a big resume booster for UNLV, beating a Power 4 team. That's a pretty solid team in the ACC that's got some big wins early on in the season. It's a very exciting matchup. I'm glad this is on Friday, a little bit later on the East Coast at 9 p.m. So certainly, an opportunity to watch this when you get off work. I will be tuned in. I know you will be tuned in as well. We're going to be rooting for the QC. I think both of us will be. I will be rooting for them. I think UNLV is going to win this game. It's going to be close, come down to the wire. Very excited to see this matchup. I could see it going either way. I'm going to take the home team, stay off my gut, pick the Group of 5 team right now. But man, this is a very close matchup between two really exciting teams.
And that point I make here on the sheet, Nick, as a key to the game is the big momentum plays. I can see a world where they potentially blow them out, because that's one thing that they seem to play with so much right now is momentum. How will they play when they don't have as much of that, though, I think is the key. When the stain kind of wears out, them being eager to prove their quarterback wrong who quit on them. That's obviously something that's playing into their favor, I think, in terms of motivation. But once you get on the gridiron and a guy like Fidel Diggs is coming off the edge and he's blowing up as a game wrecker and the quarterback on the other side's dropping dimes, I think momentum could shift a good bit and that confidence might drop all of a sudden out of nowhere.
I think it's certainly possible that happens. I could see a scenario where Syracuse scores early, maybe goes up 2 scores, 14-0 early on, and it could be an absolute gut punch for UNLV. They got to control the tempo early on. They got to control their emotions, play smart, don't turn the ball over, which they've been really good about so far this season. Be smart, run the ball effectively. On first down, you got to run the ball effectively on first down if you're an LV. Look to be in first and short or second and short early on. That would be a big key. Find nice balance, stay comfortable, and don't let the momentum of the moment get ahead of you. Focus, lock down, and get the job done.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.